Whoa, that was a close one. Flying two drones at the same time, but I had to do it because I wanted to make this video for you today comparing the Mavic 2 Pro with the Mavic 2 Zoom in 4K. So let's get right into it. Alright guys, before we look at the footage, I want to explain the settings that I used. So I left everything at default, by factory default. I didn't add any filters, no post-production, nothing. Straight out of camera is what you're gonna see. So I shot in 4K at 24 frames per second in color style normal. I used auto white balance and I kept my ISO at 100. And I also kept my shutter speed in auto mode as well as my aperture. I also shot in H.264 and exported the clips in H.264. Like I said before, I didn't do any editing or post-production, so everything you see is right out of camera. With the zoom, I shot at 24 millimeters to 28 millimeters, but I never did any zooming. I kept it at a fixed focal length. So I either shot at 24 millimeters or 28. I try to keep it at 28 whenever possible, especially when I shot with the Pro in full FOV. Now you may be asking yourself, what's full FOV? So let me explain the different 4K footage that both of these have. So first off, the Zoom only has one 4K. So I left it at the one 4K that it has the entire time. Now the Pro with the Hasselblad camera shoots at two 4Ks. It shoots at 4K HQ and it shoots at 4K full FOV. The 4K HQ stands for high quality. That's using the full 4K. Now the 4K full FOV is actually downsampled from 5.2K to 4K. Side by side, they both look great. They both have 10-bit color and you can mix and match them together and it's hard to distinguish one from the other than the focal length, okay? So the focal length between the two, the 4K HQ shoots at about 39.2 millimeters because it's cropped in a little bit. Now, the 4K full FOV uses the entire 28 millimeters, so that's gonna be wider. With all that said, if you have any questions about the settings I used, leave it in the comment below. And now let's get into the footage, and I'm gonna start with the normal zoom at 4K, and then we're gonna use the Pro at 4K HQ.
Maybe we couldn't help it. Maybe we never should.
Alright guys, so if you noticed, the Pro was much more cropped in, so everything was a lot closer, so comparing them side to side was kind of tricky, but I thought the Pro looked better. Okay, the Zoom looked really good, but I noticed it looked a little darker and a little more contrasty right out of the box. To me, the Pro looked a lot warmer, just a lot more pleasing to the eye. It also looked like I could color grade it a lot more because there's more details in the shadows. But I didn't adjust the sharpening, the contrast, or the saturation. If you look at the two images side by side, to me it looked like the zoom was more contrasty, more saturated, and it looked like there was less details in the shadow. Now let's get into the second comparison where we look at the Pro in 4K full FOV versus the same 4K with the zoom.
You cut your teeth on the like a monster saying, come back home and it don't feel the same. Well, I've left words onto a page where you never knew my name.
Alright guys, what did you think? Which one's better? We all know the Pro is more expensive, it has a bigger sensor, and to me it really showed. It just looked a lot brighter, a lot more cinematic. Colors in the zoom seem to be too saturated, much like the Mavic Pro 1. I tend to like the colors more like the Phantom 4 Pro. However, the Hasselblad in the Pro seem to be warmer in tone than the Phantom 4 Pro. I kind of like it. I like that warm tone. It looked very cinematic to me. I shot at 24 frames per second because I wanted that cinematic look. And if I shot at 30 frames per second, it would look more like the evening news. But I wanted it to look more like theater, like a cinema. So that's why I shot at 24 frames per second. I also didn't have any ND filters or any filters for that matter. So that's why I shot early in the morning because the sun was low. It was better in low light because then the shutter speed wouldn't go really high. However, I noticed in both of them some artifacting, some moire. It looked like there was too much sharpening. So if I had to go out and do some changes, one thing I would do is I would lower the contrast and the sharpness right out of the bat. I would go -1 with the contrast and -1 with the sharpness as well. And with the zoom, I would also go -1 with the saturation. I would also recommend getting an ND filter so you can shoot with a lower shutter speed and shoot with a shallow depth of field. Okay, the zoom shoots from 2.8 all the way to 3.8 aperture. As you zoom in, it changes. For this shoot, I mostly shot at 2.8 because I shot with a focal length of 24 millimeters or 28 millimeters. With the Hasselblad, you're gonna wanna use that shallow depth of field. So pick up an ND filter, shoot with a shallow depth of field like 2.8 or 3.5, something like this. And then you can lower the shutter. Without the ND filters, you're not able to do it unless you bring up that shutter speed. However, when you do it, it's not going to have that silky smooth look. So in the future, I'd like to do another comparison with ND filters. I'd also like to compare them at 2.7 and 60 frames per second and also at 120 frames per second. I realize that this 4K comparison has its limitations because I only shot at 24 frames per second and I shot right out of the box. I could have tweaked things with ND filters at different frame rates and so forth. So if you have any recommendations for footage that you'd like to see between these two drones, please leave it in the comment below. I do read all my comments. I try to respond to them all, and I do appreciate your feedback. So thank you in advance for those comments. I hope this video was helpful and can allow you to make a good buying decision if you haven't purchased one of these drones. If you already have, hopefully this will help you in tweaking the settings and changing things around. With any drone or camera, it's good to manipulate the settings for your particular style of shooting. All right guys, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, press that like button. Also add a comment below. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to my channel so you can get more videos about both of these Mavic 2 drones. And before I go, just remember, siempre pa'lante, nunca para atrás.